The model of mental health that I've been talking about is essentially a non-equilibrium model, which doesn't really make sense because all models are based on some kind of fixed viewpoint. And a non-equilibrium model of mental health means that there are no fixed states or fixed viewpoints or anything that we can definitively say within a framework of reference which can be relied upon to be consistently meaningful. Now, of course, they are all those things. There are fixed states, there are consistent ways of looking at things. That equilibria do exist, and our lives are very much based upon equilibria, fixed things, fixed states, predictable structures that carry on being the same structure over and over with time, and we can adapt to them. Logical systems, that's another example of an equilibrium state. Of course they exist, and of course our world does get defined by them, and our lives do exist in a state of orbit around equilibria. But at the same time, that's not the final word. And it's not the final word because equilibria aren't real things. They just, it's as if they're real things. So when we play a game, we'll say, it's as if I'm a this and you're a that. And so for the purposes of the game, I am this and you are that. But all of the roles in the game, the structure of the game is arbitrary. That's the whole point of games. And so what we're looking at here is a way of looking at things which says that all fixed positions are essentially arbitrary. They could have been otherwise, they might be otherwise. So they don't represent the ultimate word, the final word. So we can't anchor ourselves onto them in that way, which is what we'd like to do, because of course we're looking for ontological security, and ontological security means a security of that there is some basic structure, some basic orientation, some basic angle that we can take on existence. And it's very, very frightening for us to consider. For the most part, it can be very frightening. It generally is, to consider a possibility where everything we say is true is only true because we've said it's true. It can also be, doesn't have to be frightening, but it usually is frightening because we are very much used to orientating ourselves towards so-called immutable truths. Now, of course, I just said that we can't orientate ourselves towards equilibria to fixed structures. Of course we can, and we do all the time. It's just that there is a price to pay for this business of adapting ourselves or orientating ourselves towards systems which we say represent the final word, but which aren't. And the price is obviously, in one way, the price is anxiety, because we're saying something is what it isn't. And in a very, very fundamental way, I think we all are aware that we're going out on a limb doing this. We're up on a tree and we're going out on a limb, but it's a rotten limb. That's dead wood and it's going to give way. And I think we all do know that. Even the staunchest literal believers of literal truths, the most staunch adherents to a concrete view of reality, do know this. We might swing to the other side and be absolutely convinced in our conscious lives that yes, there is this thing which is how things actually are, and it is a concrete or literal description of the world. But our very intensity in asserting this and saying that this is true, our very aggression stems out of the other side of the picture, which is an awareness that it isn't true. And I guess it's the case that we can never escape from the awareness of what is actually true but we don't want to be true, or the awareness of the falseness of the things that we take to be true. I guess we can't ever really escape from that, but we try very hard. We certainly make a job of trying to escape from that. And instead we go searching for ontological security, which is a non-existent thing, just as all structures are unreal things ultimately. It's fine to recognize the relative reality of structures and systems, because as long as we're acknowledging the relative reality of them, we're not going all lazy. We're not assuming we can lean on them forever. Because if we do that, and I know I'm repeating myself, if we do that, it's like I'm leaning against something that isn't there. So I'm leaning against an imaginary wardrobe. So I'm leaning against it, and then there's nothing to hold me up really, so I'm going to go flying over. So we can't lean lazily on things that aren't there. That's going to cause problems. And the interesting thing to note about this is that all we ever do in life is lean lazily on non-existent structures or systems. And this state of leaning in a lazy way, lazy because we're letting that support us instead of supporting ourselves or being supported by standing up, without wanting to take that metaphor too far, because I think it gets confusing if you do. But this business of being lazy is what esoteric psychology calls unconsciousness. Being unconscious means being mentally lazy, and that there is a price to pay for being mentally unconscious, even though it's comfortable in the sense that it's initially comfortable, because whenever we're lazy, there's an initial comfort in that. I've got a job to do and I don't do it, and I skive off, and that feels great. It always feels good to avoid work if that's the way I'm orientated. If every little bit of me is orientated towards, no, I don't want to do it, and I find a way out from not doing it, then of course that feels good. So the initial phase of being unconscious, being mentally lazy, which means not relating to the essential ontological insecurity of the universe, but instead relating to a non-existent ontological security, does come with a kind of good feeling that pulls us into it. So it's kind of like if I was a lobster and I come across a lobster pot and I can smell the nice juicy bait that's in the lobster pot. The closer I get, the nicer the bait smells. I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer to that lovely smell, and the smell is getting stronger. And then the next thing, without me even realizing it, is I'm trapped. And then it's not really the bait I'm worried about so much, but how to get out of the trap, which I can't do. So even a very, very simple basic model like this explains exactly what happens to us when we become mentally lazy in this way that we can call being unconscious. Reacting to our own assumptions, our own easily made but hollow assumptions about the world, as if they were bona fide, genuine truths. And of course, when we think about it or reflect about it, that's what we all do all of the time. That's what human beings do all of the time. What do we relate to? We relate to our easily, hastily, unreflectively obtained assumptions about the world as if they were bona fide actual truths. Now, you won't meet anyone who doesn't do that, probably. Almost everybody does that, so most of the people you meet will be people that do that. So it's not an unusual thing. That's what goes on. That's what we do. And if someone would say, well, why would it be as sloppy as to do that? It's a very sloppy business. Again, the answer is what I was just saying a few minutes ago. One is that we really don't want to relate to ontological insecurity, which is what the Buddhists call groundlessness. There's no solid ground to walk on. And two is that when we do slip into allowing ourselves to believe that our half-baked assumptions about the world are actually solid all the way through, then there's a reward factor. And in actual fact, so the two things I just said, the 2 points I made are the same point, because if I'm afraid of relating honestly to infinite relativity, the infinite relativity of all positive statements that I might make about the world, I can make those as many positive statements as I want, as many definite statements as I want. That's absolutely fine, but they're only true in relation to the framework of reference which I'm assuming in order to make them. And if I see that, that's fine as well. That's not lazy thinking. But then again, there's no comfort. That doesn't help me run away from ontological insecurity. But the point I was making is that because we are afraid of relating to ontological insecurity, we do precisely this. We make literal statements. We make positive statements, philosophically positive statements. It is an outrageous thing to say, isn't it? It is. Sure it is. But then we absolutely make sure never to address the fact that these positive statements can only exist within a very narrow context of a particular framework which we have assumed to be true and ignored all other frameworks. So that's the kind of ignoring. We're ignoring something and ignoring that we're ignoring it. So that's the double ignoring which constitutes psychological unconsciousness. And that type of double ignoring also can be explained in terms of an increase of the entropy of the system. Entropy meaning that I have irreversibly lost information. The information has been got rid of, dumped. I no longer have the information. I no longer have the information telling me that there was information there that I have thrown away or dumped. I no longer have the information telling me that there was this information, which is ignorance, the existence of which I am ignorant. Which kind of goes without saying. I could just have said ignorance, because if I'm ignorant and aware of my ignorance, I'm not so ignorant after all. But that doesn't work. It's necessary to be ignorant and also be ignorant of the fact that we're ignorant, because that then creates the supports that we're looking for. So the fact that I'm afraid of infinite relativity, which is a negative, the fear is like punishing for me, means that when I discover an escape from it, that escape is going to be rewarding. It's the same thing as the fear. When I hide from fear, that fear turns into euphoria when I'm able to hide from fear. But the euphoria isn't different from the fear. So really, we're just dealing with this one, same thing. So this kind of line of argument shows that we're very, very likely to head in the direction of believing in our own assumptions, believing in a static view of the world, finite view of the world in which they are literal truths. And that is what 99.99% of humanity does believe in. And it's easy enough to find if you didn't happen to believe this statement. Talk to people, and you will find that there are things that they literally, fundamentally, concretely believe in. It's very unusual to meet someone that doesn't literally, fundamentally, concretely believe in anything. So we get sucked into the world of form, as they say in Buddhism, because of the lovely smell of ontological security that is in the lobster pot. So we go shooting in there unwisely, as is always the case with this type of thing. And so then what happens after that, stage 2, the reward fades out, and we end up in this world which isn't a real world, but which is created via our via entropy, via our ignorance, of which we are ignorant. So we've entered into a world which isn't real, but which we cannot see to be unreal. And it suited us very well in the first instance to do that, because that's how we got our ontological security. It suited us down to the ground. That's why we rushed into it. But then the downside, which we never thought of at the time, and of course we don't, because we're operating under the influence of fear, and fear just drives us, and any kind of little way of escaping from that fear is good enough. We don't go questioning its pedigree or anything like that. That's just the way it works with fear. We don't go, we'll sign anything. I will put my name to anything if you can get me away from the thing that I'm afraid of. It's only later that I can contemplate at leisure the terms of the contract. So that's kind of when we get pulled into this unconscious lazy state where we react to our own assumptions as if they aren't our own assumptions. But at this stage we can't do anything about it. We can't reverse. It's an irreversible thing. We've got into it and we can't get out of it, because that's what lobster traps are, of course, designed to be irreversible. They wouldn't be much good otherwise. If you were trying to sell reversible lobster traps, i.e. traps which it is as easy to get out of as it is to get in, you wouldn't make much money with that idea. It's not one of those great marketing ideas that's going to make you millions, obviously enough. So then there's another thing that happens. We kind of we lose the initial euphoria, and then we're left in this world which has no actual reality in it. And another way of putting that is to say that there's no real space in it. There's only the space between me and my assumptions, me and my projections, which isn't really a space at all, because they are me, so there's no space. So I'm in a claustrophobic kind of a place. Traps are claustrophobic kind of a places. And instead of the type of emotional response which I would have to being in a big place, which is to say the universe, which hasn't been turned into a kind of reflection of my own ideas or beliefs about it, that those type of feelings or emotions that I have are gone. The type of feelings we would have when faced with some sort of vastness, a mountain range, an ocean, a huge forest, whatever it is, that kind of thing, that type of oceanic type feeling is gone. And instead we're kind of operating on the basis of euphoria versus dysphoria, feeling good versus feeling bad, pain versus pleasure. And so all we can do really, once we're actually in this trap and we're orientating ourselves to the universe, which is the trap, which we just think is the whole universe, all we can do is look for pleasure and avoid pain. And since both the reward factor of euphoria and the punishment factor of dysphoria come about as a result of my own projections, as a result of the positive world that I've created around me with my mental projections. What this means is that I'm not trying to get out of the trap. What I'm trying to do is have the best possible life in the trap by getting the reward more than I get the punishment. And that's all I have to go on. So I actually think this is all that life is, getting more euphoria than I get dysphoria. And we have a kind of myth about this. We call it being a winner if I can do that, or being lucky. If you're lucky, you avoid all the shit stuff. So that's what happens when we adapt to the positive world, the mind-created world, the mind-created virtual reality. We operate on the basis of euphoria versus dysphoria, which is a type of motivational system which keeps us tied into that virtual reality. The more we operate on the basis of euphoria versus dysphoria, the motivation to find pleasure and flee from pain, the more closely we are bound to the trap. But of course, we don't even think that there could be something different, because we don't have the perspective to see that there could be something different. So our situation then becomes that we are bound to hope to win out in the game, in the system. And it's this hope that keeps us going. Every one of us, we're hoping that we're going to win out in some way. That the conditioned self, i.e. the self that defines itself in relation to the positive mind-created reality, is going to win out, come out covered in glory. This is such a strong myth. We really, really do believe in it. The myth of being a winner. But the thing that no one ever says, and if you did say it, probably people wouldn't take a hell of a lot of notice of what you're saying anyway, because it's not really what they want to hear, is that within this mind-created virtual reality, euphoria always gets bounced out by dysphoria. Pleasure always gets bounced out by pain. And so what this means is the situation is at all times null. It might seem not to be null at certain times, and we think we're heading in the direction of being a winner, but that's only just the illusion phase when we think we're escaping. But there's no escape from the mind-created virtual reality when we're operating on the basis of euphoria/dysphoria. So what this means is that our fate is a grim one. The only thing that keeps us going is the hope of everything turning out roses. And that is an absolute illusion, an absolute hallucination. There is no such thing, because the mind-created virtual reality always was and always will be a perfect nullity. Okay, thanks for watching.